What's up, my fellow emo, pop, punk, metalcore music lovers? Matrix here, and you are locked into the Matrix Music Review Podcast, the only place to get your alt-rock scene fix. We are back. Today, we are just going to run through a couple of reviews. We got new stuff from Great American Ghost. We got new stuff from City Is Ours. We're going to go over a couple of new EPs as well. And then we are going to talk a little bit about Warped Tour. We've got a decent amount of bands so far. We got a little bit of an idea of what's going on with it. I will give you guys some bands to look for and some artists to look for in the Ernie Ball Battle of the Bands. And we'll just talk about it a little bit and see kind of what everybody's thinking so far on how the rollout's been and kind of what we're expecting, what to look for this summer when Warped Tour returns. Not super heavy on the reviews today. There really hasn't been a whole lot of movement in terms of albums and EPs at the beginning of this year. It's been relatively quiet, which has me almost a little concerned because I have this feeling that we're just going to get this eruption in spring and summertime of just an absolute chaos drop of new music, which for somebody like me is great, but sometimes when we have those chaos drops and everybody drops around the same time, everything kind of gets clustered together and we don't have a chance to really digest everything that's been put out there. But you know what? More music is better than no music, so we'll take it if that's what we get here. As always, the link to everything is in the description of this episode. All of my socials and everything is in here. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Matrix Music Review. All of the playlists updates happen over on Spotify. Check that out, the Control-Alt-Save playlist. That's all of the tracks that we talk about from our album reviews, as well as all the singles that I've been listening to lately. I'll touch on them a little bit after our album reviews, because there has been some serious heat coming out in the single world lately. I feel like we have had such a strong single release past couple of weeks. It's been insane. If you're listening on Apple Music or Spotify, leave a 5-star review, leave a comment, let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if there's any band or any artist you want me to cover, if there's anything I haven't listened to yet that you really want me to listen to. Always looking for new music recommendations and always happy to check those out. And with the release of this new episode, once you guys get this new episode, you'll also be noticing that there are new logos for what Matrix Music Review is. Really stoked to be getting this new logo out there, and when you guys are coming to shows and we meet up at shows or whatever, I'm going to have stickers for everybody. We're going to start to spread the word on this. Let's make this community something that is really special and really continues to grow and show why scene music is the best music. So with that, we're going to jump into our album reviews, with the first one being Tragedy of the Commons by Great American Ghost. This is Great American Ghost's fourth album, and we got 4 singles from this prior to it coming out. And I think one of the things that stood out to me about Great American Ghost right away on this album was that it starts out with such a massive track in Kerosene, which was a single. And I think Kerosene kind of set that stage for what to expect from this album, in the sense of we are burning this shit, starting all over, and that's kind of what a lot of people want to do with the world. But I think Kerosene also is a perfect example of what this album is, and it's that it's heavy, but it doesn't overwhelm the message. And I think sometimes in hardcore, metalcore, whatever it may be, the heaviness can sometimes overshadow what the message is that some of these artists are trying to get out. And so with Great American Ghost on this Tragedy of the Commons album, I feel like we still get the heaviness. We still get exactly what we need in terms of how heavy some of these screams are, but we also still really feel the message that's coming in. This album's also a little bit faith-based, and I don't mean that, you know, it's a religious album by any means, but I do feel like there is this little facet of faith that's been built into some of these tracks. And, you know, there's a lot of tracks that talk about, you know, wars going on, or there's servants, or, you know, serving someone. I think there's kind of just this little bit of an undertone to some of those tracks that make it feel a little faith-based. There's also just this heaviness to some of the lines that are given as well. I think when you look at a song like Ghost in the Flesh, we get a line that says, "The deepest roots leave the darkest decay, and keep tragedy close to eternity that's adorned in a halo of flames. And it's really just this vivid imagery that you get throughout it. So, deepest roots, darkest decay, you can kind of picture these deep, deep tree roots kind of burrowing down into the dirt. And as they get darker and deeper, they're going to be a little bit darker and they're going to start to decay more. And then in a song like Writhe, you get that there's a bonfire of beggars and rotting limbs that yield poison fruit. To me, you put those two songs together and those last couple of lines that I just talked about together, and you're just envisioning this tree of rotted limbs that's just dropping fruit down and that's just poisonous. And it's just, as they said, empathy is but sickness buried in an unmarked grave. Like, there's all of these lines that just, for lack of better terms, they just fuck with your head, because you're like, I never really thought through things this way, but honestly, that's exactly kind of how things feel at times. Sometimes when I look at the line about the deepest roots leave the darkest decay, it's almost like the hardest situations leave the largest scars, right? Like the most intense situations, the hardest things that you go through leave the deepest scars, but eventually you kind of just have to build off of it and go through it. There's also a track on here that I had what I call a holy fuck moment. And a holy fuck moment is when I listen to a song and I say, is this something that I really want to discuss? Is this something that I really want to talk about on a podcast? Is this something that I really even want to get into? And that song is Genocide. And the title kind of tells you everything you need to know, but the lyricism behind it kind of goes right along with it. And it is a little scary. It's a thinker. I mean, it definitely makes you think. So if you want a song that may scare you a little bit, but you definitely want to get into what is going on in a track like this, I think Genocide's definitely one of those that you can look at and say, holy fuck, okay, let's take a step back and look at this one a little bit more. But that was definitely a holy fuck moment for me. And I think my top track off of this album, out of the non-singles especially, is Chapel Paralysis. I think Chapel Paralysis really just is an embodiment of what Great American Ghost is as a band, which is this heavy band, heavy messaging with some light singing to lighten it up, but you still have this almost horror film-esque feeling to these songs, and you're kind of just placed into a horror film, but you still get this like very tiny glimmer of light and hope like you get in horror movies from time to time. So it's really one of those albums that has kind of become what I call a sleeper album. It's one that I find myself just kind of going back to every so often over the past couple of weeks since it's been out. It's one that I'm like, I kind of want to listen to that album today. It reminds me a little bit of what happened last year with that Being as an Ocean record, where initially upon first listen, I didn't think much about it. I thought it was a good record, but I didn't know how much I was going to revisit it. But it just kind of keeps sneaking up on me. It keeps kind of being one of those albums that I reach for, and I think it was phenomenally done. I think Great American Ghost has a lot of potential. If this is a band that you haven't heard of yet, I think this is a really strong introduction. So if you haven't heard it yet, go check out Tragedy of the Commons by Great American Ghost. I'm going to give it a 8.8 out of 10 as its rating, but go tell me what you guys think. The next album up is Will You Still Love Me by TheCityIsOurs. This is the third album from the melodic metalcore band, and the sound in this album is very unique in a sense that to me it almost sounds like Paleface Swiss had a baby with Sleep Theory. And let me know what you guys think about that comparison, because it was hard for me to kind of come up with a four fans of for TheCityIsOurs, but when you listen to it, those kind of have those same influences, those same sounds in there. And this album was really tough for me to kind of get a score of or get a feel of, because it's so unpredictable. Because you go from a song that's like heavy and soft and hot mess to a more subdued like Sugar or Dopamine. And it's just this, I'm going to call it a new subgenre, and this is what I would call funky metalcore, because it's not your standard metalcore. It's not even your standard melodic metalcore. It kind of is a little funky, a little different. So I think this is a new genre that we got to look at, and it's because we have songs like Dopamine, which has a little bit of a disco vibe to it, but then there's also screamo in it. Like it's just kind of all over the map, which is such an interesting way to structure your album. I personally loved it, but it's definitely one that I can see not working for people if they just were in for one specific thing. We had songs like Work It Out and Can You Feel It, which have some pretty cool production sounds in it, these little added features that they threw in, and then they start singing, but then it goes right into screaming. It's an interesting little vibe, and I think that's kind of where I fell with this record, is that it's intriguing. There's no real rhyme or reason to my feelings on it. There's no one song, there's no one thing that stands out above the rest about this record. I think it's a solid record. I think it's one that, if you're the right type of person, I think you will enjoy it. If you are someone that's looking for something that's very standard, very cut and dry, this is not going to be for you. But for me, it was about an 8.1 out of 10. I think it was really solid, and I'm excited to see what everybody else thinks about this. So if you haven't heard it yet, go check out Will You Still Love Me by TheCityIsOurs. Moving into our EP list, we have Sunk Cost Fallacy by Down and Out. Down and Out are furthering this Australian pop punk supremacy that is going on right now in the scene, that has been kind of started by Between You and Me, Dear Seattle. There's not really a specific genre for these guys. There's some punk, there's some emo, there's some pop punk influences. You get some heavy, harder stuff on a song like Leech. But overall, it does exactly what I would expect an Australian scene band to do right now. The great collaboration with As December Falls. Those vocals blend together almost too perfectly. It sounds too good. And you get a line in there that says, "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers." And I don't know that there's anything like super deep about a line like that, but for me, it just kind of stood out because it was like, the person doing the damage forgets, but the person being damaged always remembers. That's kind of the way I took that line, and that's an interesting way to put that. There's almost this emo anthemic sound to a song like Tombstone, which is all about wanting to change and not feel anxiety and things along that line. And I think that's a very anthemic type of song. And then the title track is so solid musically, lyrically, and it really showcases that band's best sound, which I would consider to be a heavy pop punk sound. Overall, I think this EP was very, very good. There was nothing to dislike on it. It is a 4.7 out of 5 for me. This is one of my favorites so far. It probably is my favorite EP so far this year. And I think this is a real standout for Down and Out as a band as well. So if you haven't heard it yet, go check out Sunk Cost Fallacy by Down and Out. And the last EP that I'm going to talk about is Rumors by Internet Friends. Now look, I realize that all of these tracks have been released previously as singles, but I feel like I still wanted to touch on it because this is a really fun pop punk sound, kind of in the Mayday Parade, We the King's realm, and a song like You Give Me Something instantly transported me back to 2008, 2010, being in high school with, having a summer or a springtime crush on somebody and really playing music in your car, just kind of when music was the most important to you that it will ever be, and all those lyrics meant so much to you, and you were going through so much as a kid, and when we all fell in love with this scene music. And, you get that on the You Give Me Something song, you get that on a song called Recipe for Therapy. And I think, to me, that's really what made me want to talk about this EP a little bit, was that there are still bands out there giving us that same nostalgic feeling. There are still bands out there that are new bands that are doing things that even back 15 years ago, we would have loved it. And I think that's really cool. I think that really goes to show the staying power of scene music. And it goes to show that the impact that it had has been so monumental that people still want to do it and people still enjoy it. And I think that's amazing. So this EP, again, is a 4.5 out of 5 for me. It's a really solid EP. Again, I realize that all these songs were released as singles anyway, but for me, it's definitely something that transports me back to a better time and back to a time where music really did mean a lot to me right away. And it still means a lot to me now, but, back then it felt like it meant a little more at the time. So go check out Rumors by Internet Friends. Before we start talking about Warped Tour and what that's going to be, I do want to touch on some of these singles that have been coming out lately, because, like I said, there has been a bunch to really be excited about. When we look at some of the artists that, you guys have heard me talk about a lot and talk about in the sense of artists maybe you haven't heard from before, Gabe Woodrow dropped a song called Hallways, which is a really nice emo anthem. We have Friend Circle dropping Dream Guest, which is the most hilarious play on that JoJo Siwa interview where she's like, who would be my dream guest on my podcast? And I think that's fantastic. I love when bands do stuff like that. Nick Karcher just dropped his new one, Not Another Song, called Perfect, which again really fits that early to mid 2000s pop punk vibes, and I love that. Gary Bender dropped his new one, Worry About Me, and all these tracks are linked in the playlist for Control-Alt-Save. But there's a couple that I want to touch on a little bit further in detail here. First one being Static by Sleep Theory. This song is perfectly positioned to be a Song of the Summer contender. It checks all the boxes. It has that up-tempo energy. It's right before an album's getting ready to come out for them, right before they get ready to go out on tour, and that album is definitely one of my more anticipated albums of 2025 so far. I think Sleep Theory is one of those bands that is just set to absolutely erupt onto the scene. They started out really strong last year, and I think with this album coming out, it is going to catapult them into that next tier. The other song I want to talk about is Tarka by Bloodywood. Bloodywood is easily my most anticipated album of the year so far. Until we get, confirmation, whatever the hell Sleep Token's doing on their socials right now. They claim they're dropping stuff. I don't know what they're doing. But Bloodywood is a band that incorporates some Indian sounds into their metal music and their hardcore music. And these songs so far have been so good. New Delhi was incredible. Tadika is fantastic. And this is the difference in metalcore that we like to see. There's these different things that happen. It's kind of like when we talked about Left on Red and Pyroceniac, where it's just something different that we're not used to seeing, that we haven't seen before, that comes up and we're like, okay, this has got my attention. Well, Bloodywood certainly has my attention. And speaking of having my attention, I think they have everybody's attention at this point. This is not a new band by any stretch of the imagination, but Elevator Operator by Electric Callboy. Could that track be any more fun? Could that track be any more exciting? The music video is hilarious. Electric Callboy just really knows how to capture an audience and captivate somebody with what they're doing and how they do it. I think that's just unbelievable. And lastly, Imminence just continues to prove their dominance. Their new track, Death Shall Have No Dominion, is a little bit of dipping their toe into deathcore, which I would not have predicted for them, but fuck, man, I think they just continue to show that whatever they touch is going to turn to gold, and whatever they touch is going to be fantastic. So just hang on for the ride and see what they got coming next, because it is just really, really cool to see. So with that, let's talk about Warped Tour. Warped Tour is back. 30 years of Warped Tour. 3 dates, or 3 locations, I should say. DC, Long Beach, and Orlando. DC being the first one up. DC being the one that I'm going to go to. So that's the one I'm going to talk about today. And the first thing we got to talk about is this rollout process. Rollout process started back in January, and we've been announcing 4 to 6 bands every single day. Some are at all sites, some are at one site, some are at 2 sites. You got to pay attention to where these bands are dropping and where they're going. I've seen a lot of people really upset about this rollout process. I've seen a lot of people kind of questioning what these lineups are so far. The only thing I can say is, lineup-wise, in terms of the rollout process, I don't really have a problem with the way they've been doing it. I think it's difficult. It's difficult for, somebody like me that likes to update people on when new shows come out, update people on what new lineups look like. For the first, couple of weeks, I was trying to send out every night who was added to the lineup, whether that was all sites, just one site, whatever. But it gets to be too hard. It gets to be too hard for me to update that. So just kind of waiting until we get some bigger names to pop up, and then I might, mention that there. But in terms of what they're doing to roll it out, I don't think it's that bad. I think it keeps everybody guessing, and I think it keeps everything a little mysterious. And I think sometimes people don't like when festival lineups are mysterious, and I can understand that because you want to know who you're paying to see. And I think, at least for me, I was going to Warped Tour no matter what. I was going because regardless of what bands show up, I'm still going for the experience of it all, whether it's the same or whether it's different. I don't really fucking know, but I'm going because it's going to be a good experience. And at this point, the price that I paid for 2 days and 90 plus bands is going to be worth it regardless of who shows up. But let's talk about who's showing up. As I said, we're talking DC here. That's where I'm going to be. Hopefully I catch some of y'all out there as well. But DC-wise, some of the big names that pop out to me are Avril Lavigne, Bless the Fall, Bowling for Soup, Chiodos, Escape the Fate, From Ashes to New, Honey Revenge, Ice Nine Kills, Memphis Mayfire, Of Mice and Men, Seosin, Senses Fail, Silverstein, Simple Plan, State Champs, The Main, We Came as Romans, We the Kings. It's a decent amount of people so far, and that's not even half of who's actually going to be there. There's some other names like Games We Play, 408, 303. Those types of bands are going to be there as well. But this podcast is going to come out on February 20th. I'm recording it on the 19th. As of this recording, there's still 33 bands and artists to be announced for Warped Tour in DC. That is insane to me. That is absolutely insane to me. Yeah, it's going to suck to run back and forth between stages. Yeah, it's going to suck that, you're not going to see everybody that you want to see. But to me, I'm really excited because I know a lot of people are going to say that, Simple Plan is washed, and, Avril Lavigne being there is not really a game changer for them, or Bless the Fall hasn't done anything in a long time, or Memphis Mayfire isn't what they used to be. Do I agree with that? No, not at all. I think they each have their individual things. I think it's still good. I think what people need to decide is that, or what people need to understand is that Warped Tour is not going to come back like it was in the past. It's just a simple fact. It's never going to come back. It's never going to be what we thought it was. I'm likening it to Call of Duty, guys. Call of Duty ain't what it once was. People still play it. People still going to go do it. Going to buy the new one. And with Warped Tour, guess what? We're still going to do it. We're still going to go to it. I think the thing that I've seen about Warped Tour that really frustrated me the most was that somebody had said that the lineup so far across all three spaces have a lot of no-name nobodies on it that they couldn't even get behind. That's a tough one for me. And it's a tough one for me because when we're talking about scene music, people are kind of in this weird bubble. They are stuck in they want things to sound like basically 2004 to 2012. They want things to sound like music did back then. They want the bands from back then to continue to make that type of music. Some are, some aren't. But what I struggle with is that they say, oh, Warped Tour never had these no-name bands. Do you think that when they first started out, All Time Low, Mayday Parade, Simple Plan, these were do you think they were big names back when they were going to Warped Tour? Warped Tour is where a lot of bands, artists in general have gotten their start. So Warped Tour can be this launching pad for some of these so-called no-name bands that you're talking about. And trust me, some of the no-names that you're probably referring to are going to be some of your favorite sets of Warped. I'm going to tell you right now, for all those that are down there in Orlando, which I'm pretty sure this is where this is happening, tell me that Arrows in Action isn't one of the best sets that you see. When I go to DC, I'm counting on Honey Revenge to put out probably one of the best sets of the weekend, because I expect them to be this next group that leads scene music into this next generation. You're right, it's not going to be what it used to be, and some of the bands that are coming to this are probably going to disappoint us. It's the nature of the beast, but you know what? We're there, we're together, we're doing something we love, we're listening to music that we love. Who cares? Who cares if it doesn't sound great? Who cares if our favorite artist doesn't show up? Who cares if they can't get a band like Bring Me or a band like My Chem or a band like Green Day to come back to a Warped Tour? I didn't expect them to. But what I did expect is a bunch of these bands to come back and show up and say, let's do something that we all love. Let's have this camaraderie together and let's make Warped Tour another thing and bring it back for the people that loved it and bring it back and do it as best as we can to what we did in the past. So that's where my discussion of Warped Tour kind of ends, because I'm really stoked for it. I know that a lot of other people are too. And let's see what this lineup finishes off with. I'm really excited. Just today alone, we got Silverstein and From Ashes to New. I mean, damn. It's not overwhelming, but goddamn, that's a good double up right there. So let me know what you think in the comments of what Warped Tour's doing, how you like the rollout, what you think of the bands, and what you think of the lineup so far, and who you want to see left on the lineup kind of show up. So let me know what you think about that. That wraps it up for us here on Matrix Music Review. I hope everybody enjoyed the album reviews, single talks, Warped Tour talk, all that stuff. As always, every link to everything you need from me is in the description of this episode. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Matrix Music Review. I'm most active over on Instagram, so if you want to try and send me something, new music recs or whatever, that's probably the best place to do that. If you're listening on Apple Music or Spotify, leave a 5-star review. Let me know how things are going. If you like the show, if you want me to cover something new, I'm more than happy to take new recommendations. We are on YouTube. Go over to YouTube and subscribe to that channel, Matrix Music Review. All of the podcasts are over there as well. And as I always do at the end of each episode, I'm asking that everybody share this podcast with everybody that they know. Build our community of alt-rock music scene, music lovers, and continue to build upon what we've done so far. I'm really excited to see what this year's brings for scene music and what it brings for the podcast in general. So with that, I will be back very soon with more reviews, and I will see you guys next time.